Now on what's happening in Baton Rouge. Next Tuesday, state lawmakers will head back there for a veto override session.
And political analysts say it's mainly because Governor John Bel Edwards vetoed 3 measures concerning LGBTQ youth. Andres Fuentes explains.
The override veto session is no surprise for Dillard University political analyst Dr. Robert Collins. He says that state Republicans have been waiting for the day.
They were especially upset of the governor's veto of the package of LGBTQ bills, which they feel are good culture war issues.
The 3 bills in question would call for a ban on youth gender-affirming care, limit the use of pronouns and names students can use in K-12 schools, and prohibit talk of sexual orientation and gender identity in public schools.
This is not anything that is going to protect kids in any form or fashion.
Terry Landry with the Southern Poverty Law Center says his organization is trying to educate the public of what might happen if the bills become law.
It's going to cause some problems. We already see a high rate of anxiety, depression, and suicide in teenage kids today. And I think that bills like these only, increase the likelihood of those things happening, unfortunately.
Republicans overwhelmingly supported the override session. Senator Kirk Talbot of River Ridge says the bills should become law.
The first one that comes to mind is obviously the transgender bill that, allows, that would prevent, surgeries and puberty blockers for young children. I think that needs to be overturned. 2 Republican
state senators, Roger Pope of Denham Springs and Fred Mills of New Iberia, did not fall in line with their party. Mills originally shot down the transgender health care bill in committee.
Mills had expressed reservations about this bill in the past when it was in committee, so he thought it was too extreme and that it had the potential to harm LGBTQ children.
Collins says while 2 Republicans went against their caucus, it will still be an uphill battle for Democrats who don't want the bills to become law due to the Republican supermajority. In the meantime, the Southern Poverty Law Center says they are preparing for whatever scenario happens, especially if the override is successful.
You'll wind up in some type of litigation, whether it's from advocates such as SPLC or ACLU, or if it's just individual parents fighting, for their rights of their children.
Reporting in New Orleans, Andres Fuentes, Fox 8, Local First.